It is. I'm so glad that you are celebrating. I hosted my first WOW meeting.
It was supposed to be just another elegant royal dinner. Crystal glasses clinking, polite smiles exchanged, and rehearsed pleasantries floating over polished silverware. But behind the candlelight and couture, tension simmered. The palace had tried to hide it for months. Whispers of division, unease, and legacy disputes were brushed aside with practiced grace, until one voice, small but steady, cut through the silence. Princess Charlotte, barely tall enough to reach the table's centerpiece, stood up and said the one name that still unsettles the crown, Diana. And with 6 unforgettable words, she didn't just defend her grandmother. She exposed a wound the royal family had tried desperately to bury. What followed left Queen Camilla humiliated, King Charles shaken, and Prince William doing something no one expected, applauding. This wasn't a tantrum. It was a reckoning, and it marked a moment the monarchy may never recover from. What did Charlotte say? Why did it strike such a nerve? And were the aftershocks still rippling through royal halls? Stick with us as we uncover the moment a princess shattered the silence. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because what happens next might just change royal history forever. The invitation was described as a gesture of goodwill, an olive branch wrapped in royal formality. King Charles, weary of the widening rift between Queen Camilla and the Wales household, had quietly arranged a private family dinner. The location, a secluded countryside estate, far from flashing cameras and curious eyes. No press, no announcements, just immediate family. The goal was unity, a reset, a chance to mend the cracks that polite smiles had failed to hide. Everything was curated to perfection. Crystal goblets reflected the soft glow of chandeliers. Plates were set with military precision, and each seat at the table had been selected with care, strategically placed to avoid friction. The floral centerpieces were subtle nods to royal tradition: lilies for peace, roses for legacy, lavender for grace. And yet, beneath the surface, the room crackled with unspoken tension. Every glance was measured, every toast a performance. The laughter sounded rehearsed. Even the children, trained in decorum from birth, seemed quieter than usual. Those closest to the scene say the silence wasn't just awkward, it was suffocating. William spoke only when necessary. Kate offered polite nods, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Camilla, ever composed, tried to steer the conversation toward lighter topics: art, travel, even the weather. But no one took the bait, because everyone knew this dinner wasn't about food or family. It was about control. And as the courses passed and wine glasses emptied, the calm began to fracture. It happened during the 3rd course, just as the conversation began to brush against the subject of legacy. Someone, perhaps naively, mentioned Diana's influence on the modern monarchy, how her warmth had reshaped public perception. That's when Camilla, in a voice as smooth as the wine being poured, made her move. "Some memories," she said, her fork resting delicately against her plate, "are best left in the past." At first, no one reacted. The room froze mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Eyes flicked around the table in quiet panic. But no one spoke. Not Kate, not William, not even Charles. The remark had been crafted with plausible deniability, soft in tone, sharp in meaning. But one person didn't miss its weight. One person felt the sting more than anyone else: Princess Charlotte. At first, no one reacted. The room froze mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Eyes flicked around the table in quiet panic. But no one spoke. Not Kate, not William, not even Charles. The remark had been crafted with plausible deniability, soft in tone, sharp in meaning. But one person didn't miss its weight. One person felt the sting more than anyone else: Princess Charlotte. And for Charlotte, that was no longer something she could ignore. Weeks before that dinner, Charlotte had been led into a quiet sitting room. No cameras, just hushed attendants and a velvet-lined tray. It was meant to be a sweet rite of passage, a glimpse at the jewels she might one day wear. Emeralds, pearls, diamond sprays, each one sparkling under lamplight. But then she saw it, nestled at the center like a heartbeat. The Spencer tiara, the same delicate lattice of diamonds her grandmother wore the day the world stopped to watch her marry a prince. Charlotte didn't hesitate. Her fingers hovered, reverent, inches from the velvet. Not that one. Camilla's voice cut the air like a snap string. Firm. Final. It isn't suitable for modern princesses. The lid closed with a quiet thud that felt louder than a slammed door. Another tiara, pretty but forgettable, was nudged forward instead. Charlotte's hand sank back to her side. She glanced at her mother, searching for a rescue that never came. Kate's lips pressed together. Her eyes said, "Wait, not now." So Charlotte swallowed it. All of it. The dismissal, the erased history, the message buried beneath a polite smile. That night, in the dark of her room, she whispered 6 words that hardened into resolve. "One day, I'll wear it anyway." So when Camilla's line at dinner tried to lock Diana away again, Charlotte's promise wasn't just a memory. It was a match, and the room was dry tinder. The scrape of her chair was barely audible, but it sliced through the hush like thunder. Charlotte rose, chin lifted, hands steady, while every adult at the table clung to their manners like armor. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. "You've tried to erase her," she said, each word deliberate. "But you'll never erase Diana." For a breathless second, nothing moved. Charles's fork slipped and hit the china with a sharp clink. Kate's eyes widened, shock and pride warring behind them. George stared, blinking, as if he'd just watched a storybook character step off the page. And William? A slow smile broke across his face. He leaned back, letting the moment hang, then brought his hands together. One clap, then another. "Bravo, Charlotte." The sound rolled across the room, impossible to ignore, a verdict delivered in applause. Camilla's composure shattered. Color rushed to her cheeks as she pushed back from the table. "This is unacceptable. I won't be disrespected like this," she snapped, napkin tumbling to the floor as she turned on her heel and left. Heels echoed down the corridor, each step a retreat and a warning. The room didn't breathe until she was gone. And even then, the air felt different, lighter for some, heavier for others. Because the silence Charlotte broke couldn't be glued back together with polite smiles. But the real battle wasn't over the dinner table. It was waiting in the shadows, ready to explode by morning. By dawn, the palace walls were humming, not with official statements, but with whispers, drafts, and damage control. Camilla's team moved first, slipping carefully worded tidbits to friendly outlets. Charlotte was emotional, misguided, influenced by adults who should know better. One headline even framed it as a misunderstood family moment. But William answered without a single quote. 2 joint appearances with Camilla, gone from the schedule. No explanation, just a quiet erasure that spoke louder than any press release. Kate followed suit in her own way. At a charity event days later, she kept a deliberate distance. No shared photos, no staged laughter, no casual shoulder touches. Courtiers noticed. So did cameras. Inside the palace, staff began choosing hallways with care. Team Charlotte and Team Camilla became whispered labels, and doors that used to stay open now clicked shut a little faster. Senior advisors tiptoed, avoiding meetings where both camps might collide. Meanwhile, Charlotte went back to schoolwork and piano practice, but the ground under her feet had shifted. She'd lit a fuse, and everyone knew it. The question wasn't whether there would be fallout. It was how far it would spread, and who would still be standing when the smoke cleared. And outside those gates, the public was about to make their verdict known. By mid-morning, the story wasn't just inside palace corridors, it was everywhere. Social feeds ignited first. Clips of Charlotte's past appearances resurfaced, her steady stare and unflinching posture now recast as proof of a budding firebrand. Hashtags like hashtag Bravo Charlotte and hashtag Diana Lives on rocketed up the trends. Street artists in London sketched fresh murals overnight. Charlotte beside Diana, 2 profiles in the same halo of light. Editorials called her honesty the breath the monarchy has been holding for years. Comment sections overflowed with strangers calling her the People's Princess Reborn, a phrase no one had dared to use since the 90s. Crowds at events shifted too. Where once the cheers were broad and general, now hand-painted signs singled her out. Diana would be proud, never erased. Photographers started angling for her reaction shots, not just the adults. And Charlotte, still a child but newly aware, walked a touch taller. Her eye contact held, her waves were deliberate, her smiles measured. It wasn't arrogance, it was awareness. She felt the weight of a story and realized it could be carried instead of silenced. Meanwhile, the press tone around Camilla cooled. Coverage grew brittle, analytical, even skeptical. Every move she made was scrutinized through the lens of that dinner. And while the public cheered Charlotte Spark, an older, more cautious figure felt the pressure building on both sides. Because back inside Windsor, King Charles was about to face a choice he could no longer delay. Pressure finally forced his hand. For 2 days, Charles paced private corridors, replaying every word from that dinner like a judge reviewing evidence. Then he did something no one predicted. He summoned Charlotte and Kate to Windsor. No photographers, no briefing notes, just tea, a fireplace, and a king who suddenly looked more like a grandfather. He didn't scold her. He listened. Then, with a softness rarely seen in public, he said, "Your strength runs deep. Your grandmother would have been proud." But he didn't stop there. He warned her, too, about the cost of speaking out when every syllable can ricochet through headlines. Not to silence her, but to teach her how to choose her moments like a future stateswoman, not just a brave child. The tone shifted when Camilla arrived later. That meeting was sealed tight. Aides dismissed. Voices raised behind heavy doors. Those nearby heard the cadence of argument. Bursts of heat, stretches of icy quiet, a king's voice holding firm. When Camilla emerged, her expression was carved from stone. By week's end, subtle changes confirmed what no statement would admit. She'd step back from events involving Charlotte. Fewer shared engagements. Careful calendar edits. Silence disguised as diplomacy. Charles had drawn a line, but it wasn't the last. Because while schedules shifted in the shadows, something bigger was being rewritten in plain sight. Charlotte's future was about to be recalibrated, and the palace was already moving the pieces. Inside briefing rooms once reserved for heirs and senior staff, a new name began appearing on agendas. Charlotte. Quietly, her calendar was reworked. Tutors in public speaking, modern media, and humanitarian history were reassigned to her orbit. Not to polish her into a porcelain doll, but to sharpen a voice the palace now realized it couldn't afford to muffle. She wasn't just the spirited sister of a future king anymore. She was a narrative force, and narratives move nations. Advisors whispered about expanded visibility and strategic engagements. Invitations that once defaulted to George now arrived, with Charlotte's name in bold. Kate allowed it cautiously. "We prepare her, but we don't change her," she reportedly told staff, permission with guardrails. William, meanwhile, watched with a pride he didn't bother hiding. At events, cameras caught him leaning down to hear her thoughts, treating her commentary less like chatter and more like counsel. And the palace decor? Subtle shifts there, too. A portrait restored here. A mention of Diana added to a speech there. Nothing flashy, just a steady rethreading of history, with Charlotte as the needle. But this wasn't a coronation. It was a gamble. Could a monarchy built on silence survive a truth-teller growing up inside it? Because if a single sentence could shake the walls, what happens when she decides to build new ones? The night began with crystal and courtesy, but it ended with a child forcing a crown to remember its heart. Charlotte didn't just defend a name. She reignited a legacy the palace tried to file away. Camilla's retreat, William's applause, Charles's conflicted compassion, and a public ready to rally behind a fearless little voice. All of it signals a shift the monarchy can't ignore. So now the real question isn't what Charlotte said at that table. It's what she'll dare to do next, and how far the palace will let her go. Do you think this moment marks the start of a more honest, people-focused monarchy? Or was it a spark the institution will try to smother? Drop your take in the comments. And And if you want to follow every twist as this story unfolds, make sure you hit subscribe right now. Because when a princess speaks truth to power once, you can bet the world will be listening for the next time.